Hello, and welcome to the Education Zone, the podcast that's all about the best practices in learning and teaching. I'm your host, Ali Reza Tahmasabi, and today we're going to talk about student engagement with Thiago Hinkel. Thiago is a learning experience designer with technology integrated learning and an instructor at the University of Victoria. We'll discuss the essential strategies that are needed to create an engaging classroom, make effective discussion forums, minimize distractions for students when using online tools, manage expectations, and use online tools effectively for online courses. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe to the Education Zone podcast on YouTube. There we go. Yeah, I'm doing well. Just I've been with the LTSI since last month, just working with instructors, and it's been interesting because I'm working with the technology aspect of helping instructors. And I know I was in your course, and we worked a little bit on the pedagogical side, with Bloom's taxonomy and all that. But yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot to talk about, and especially with the pandemic now that everything's online. And there's been a lot of challenges with teaching online. I was wondering about what your perspective is. Was EDCI always an online course before the pandemic, or?
Yes, so EDCI 339 distributed and open learning. I have been involved with this course now for the last 3 years. And this has always been an online course, an online asynchronous course. So the pandemic actually hasn't caused a big change to it. I think the biggest change was, it was because we changed the platforms, right? Learning management systems, LMS last year. So the university stopped using course spaces, which is based on Moodle, and migrated into Brightspace. So for me, the only change at my end was actually that I had to migrate my course from course spaces into Brightspace. In the beginning, it was a little bit of work because although we can create a migration package, right, and most things will transport okay to the different platform, some of the things needed adjustment, which was fine because I really needed to go through everything anyway to check if everything was working in the new platform. So actually it was an opportunity for me to review some things, to test some things out now in the new platform. But I will say that the biggest change has been, I think, into my students, right? Just like before the pandemic, EDCI 339 was probably one of the only courses online my students were taking or had taken, right? But now after the pandemic, it's just another course online. So for example, the interesting part is that EDCI is an online course. It's delivered online, but it's also about online education. So the focus of the course is about that, right? So I think what my students have to say now, of course, what they had to say before was very interesting, but people were just more guessing things about online learning. And now, having been through like a whole year studying online, people have so much more to say and to contribute to the course.
Yeah, that was my first semester back actually in the summer. That it was the first full semester that UVic went online with learning. And yeah, it was an interesting dynamic because I was doing an online course, but it was really about also online learning and teaching, and us having to make our own mini course. And yeah, it really taught me like it's one thing having to learn how to learn, especially online, because it's different, like I know we wanted to talk about student engagement because it's really hard to also stay engaged online, because as opposed to face-to-face classroom, because there's a sense of community in the face-to-face classroom, whereas online you're just by yourself, right? And especially if it's asynchronous, it's at your own pace, so you don't really, it's hard to judge how you're doing, right? So I was wondering what methods have you always used to like keep students engaged even though it's an online course? And did it change when the pandemic started?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we talk about engagement, I think it's very interesting for us to mention that when we think of online learning, we can say that maybe we have 3 different types of engagement. It can be student to content, student to instructor, and student to other students, right? So we can see it in these three different levels. I think as for content, the strategies I try to use to make my students engage with content is, first of all, to provide different types of format. So I do have some readings in my course, and I would say it's the major part of the materials I provide students is reading materials, but I don't have only that. I try to have videos as well. I don't have as much audio in this course, but whenever possible, other sources, right? And of course, we do have academic readings per se, articles and papers, but we also have other types of text information, you know, from websites and things that are like more informal. And another thing, I think that to keep students engaged with content, maybe it has to make sense to them or relate to them somehow. So my course, in a sense, I see it as a very practical course, in the sense that I will provide students with materials just, you know, to build a base, a knowledge base, and then they are sent out to explore something that has to do with that. And then they have to come back to Brightspace and report and eventually talk to students about that. So that would be the part of engaging with the content. Again, different formats as much as possible, and relating to students. And the second point, the engagement between instructor and students, I always try to invest in very strong communication strategies, right? So I know that inside Brightspace, we have many possibilities. We can send announcements, create announcements that are visible to the whole class. We can send emails to the whole class or to a few students, and also use the instant messaging. So I have been trying different types of strategies. And the one that has been working the most, the best for me, and it has also been a learning curve for me, is video making, right? When I started teaching this course, I would just like provide instructions basically by writing, by sending emails and writing announcements in course spaces. But with the pandemic now, I started investing more and more in videos that cover what students have to do in each week, and also the content. And that, I think, has been a very positive strategy. At the end of the course, when I ask students things that have worked for them, usually they'll say, well, the videos are very helpful. So it's something I'm trying to invest more and more. And it's been very nice for me, actually, professionally, to develop that skill. Like a year ago or more, I would take like 2 hours or more to just have like a 10-minute video ready. And today, you know, I feel more comfortable speaking on the camera. I have learned how to use my editing software more. So I can do videos like really on the go now, because of the experience I've been able to accumulate during this time. And finally, engagement between students with students, right, is just like really providing the space for that. I think we're going to talk about this maybe a bit more as we go today, but I use a lot of discussion topics, discussion forums in my course, and that's the way I feel students can engage more, at least in an asynchronous method of instruction. Of course, discussion topics, discussion forums will not do like the magic by themselves. I think there needs to be a planning component there. And of course, maybe I can expand on this a bit later, but basically it has to have a purpose, right? It cannot be super controlled, in a sense that students don't have like a wiggle room to do, like, you know, to put themselves there. But if it's just too loose and too open, I feel that participation will not happen.
Right. Yeah. Those are great three major points about like engagement, and also going back to content, engagement with content. I was wondering how you choose the the articles, the videos, because there's a lot of, also with the age of technology, we have a lot of information and misinformation, and with the content relating to the course, how do you choose the best ones, and how do you choose the ones that are actually accessible and are interesting and engaging and are not like, there's no cognitive overload? Because there has been times where I have to read like 20-30 pages of text, and that's not super engaging. So I was wondering, how do you choose the content?
So when I started teaching this course, I had access to an outline that was used before before. So it already contains some required readings, right? So I think I started building the course based on that list. So I considered everything that was there. I started reading it, and I selected the ones I thought, I could work with. And some others I just selected on my own. So I try really to offer a balance. I think there should be like those more dense and heavy academic readings there, because it's just part of your university. You want to be able to do a course that enables you to read difficult things and make sense of more difficult data. It has to do with like more advanced thinking, right? So I try to have some of those there. And of course, they are academic materials, so they have been peer reviewed, they appeared in journals and things like that. So in that sense, we can trust the information that is there because it has been peer reviewed. But also I try to incorporate things, for example, newspaper articles and things like that, because it seems to be more informal and kind of explaining more difficult content in using easier terms, maybe. And of course, and for me to select those, I will have to read, they have to make sense to me and kind of align with what I want to say as well to my students. So it's like a way for me to channel what I want to say, I believe about online learning, but by means of something that someone else has written, right? And I also have some things there. For example, I think of this very specific video that I have in one of the topics in the course about gamification, right? I myself have always played video games, and I always say how video games helped me a lot with learning, especially with English, a second language to me, but many other life skills, right? So there is this video that I like that I share with my students. And I agree with some parts of this video, but some other parts I don't agree so much, because I think it's just like telling people, or you do this, or you do that. Like, for example, saying like, oh, if you like video games, probably you don't like reading, and vice versa, right? And I tell my students, watch this video, but with a critical lens, right? I personally think you can be a gamer and still love literature and sit down quietly to read a book, right? So because we also want students to have that critical perspective, right? I know in the other course I teach, it was about social media and selfies, and it had a very critical perspective on selfies, saying, it was going more towards like how bad they can be. And like the reaction from students was impressive. They were like, hey, this is not true. I do selfies and this does not relate to me. So those things, so academic readings, peer reviewed, things that are more like day to day, like newspaper articles, but also things that maybe I don't agree, but I would like my students to, develop a critical thinking about it and find a way to respond to it critically as well.
Right. Yeah. Critical thinking is like really essential, because it's if you challenge students' beliefs on an idea and get them to think about or what their beliefs are, and like get them to actually share their ideas and like converse with each other, that's like a learning experience, where it's not just like we're expecting what we've seen or read or watched or anything. We're actually having a conversation. And if it's a back and forth conversation with a student, either or discussion forum, anywhere, that's I think that's where learning really happens there.
Exactly. I agree with you there. And that's exactly what I try to do in my course. Is not like, to fill people up with information and then ask them to tell me like, okay, how much did you memorize about that? For me, of course, some things in education kind of have to be like that. Some things you do have to memorize, and learn that way, because they will be the base for you to build on other type of knowledge. But I agree with you. I think learning happens when you are exposed to something, you understand it yourself, and then you tell other people what you understood about it, and then other people have the chance to tell you, hey, I saw it this way, and then you start having a conversation, right? So it's dialogical, it's a build up, and it's not a given.
Right. And also, so moving on, we were talking about conversations and discussion forums. I know discussion forums in some courses I have seen to extent that it's been used very effectively, where like there's been introduction forums in the beginning, and there's topics each week on a subject, and there's a minimum word count, and there's minimum number of replies we have to do. But there's also other courses where it's just the intro forum, they never use it again, so there's no conversations with any other students. So two of my question is, how do you use discussion forums, and how do you use it where it's not just posting your response and just reading it and not responding, and there's like a, how do you get the back and forth also between students, so there's a dialogue and a community there?
Yes, discussion topics, it's actually a very interesting topic, because I think it creates a way of conversation that in a sense you don't see in real life, in physical life, right? Of course, you have, you can sit down and talk to people, and people will take turns and things like that. But discussion topics are a little bit different, because I think it mixes a bit of the oral language, in a sense that you are expressing what you understand, what you feel, but it's asynchronous, right? So you have the time to think about it, you can take your time, you have materials to consult, and then you can consolidate your response, right? For me, discussion forums, they work well in a semi-structured way. And I think I used that expression before, and I'm going to tell you what I think about that, what I understand about that. So I've tried open discussion topics in the past that people can just participate if they have a question or they have something to say. And to my experiences, I will open them in the beginning of the term, and sometimes 1, 2 people will participate, but will be dead throughout the term. Whereas when they're semi-structured, and I will use an expression here, I like to offer like a bait, as if we were fishing, right? And maybe that bait is a little piece of a grade, right? So there is a grade attached to it. And why am I saying that this is like a bait? Because students will see it's a requirement of the course, and when you complete it, you will get a grade, right? But the objective is not getting the grade. Maybe that will be the first mindset. Students will say, hey, I have to participate because it's a requirement and I need to get a grade. And that's my bait. But what they will find there, it's actually the opportunity like to express what they think and interact with other people, right? And the forums I have in my course, for me, the best way is really to structure them in a sense, proposing a minimum number of characters, right? So just to keep things like as a standard, right? Otherwise, people will write just too much, people will just write too little. So to keep things as a standard, I will propose a standard, like it has to have a minimum of characters. And I also will have very clear questions and a very clear objective. So it's not simply a forum to say, what do you think? But it's a forum for you to say, what do you think about this specific part of content that we studied by means of a reading, by watching a video, then going with that reading in mind and that video in mind, going into the internet and exploring a platform. Basically how that platform could be used for pedagogical purposes, and then come back into the forum and report back to the class with very specific questions in mind. For example, about this, what did you find? How would you relate this to that? And also the replies will be required too. So there is a minimum of replies that are required and are part of a grade, again, to serve as a bait. But in the end, I think people will go beyond that. And that's what I hear, at least I hear back from some of my students saying, hey, it was great participating in the forum because I could say what I wanted to say and people replied to me, right? And something I also hear, and before we were talking about keeping students engaged, right? I think discussion topics are a very good way to keep people engaged, in a sense that it's very democratic, that you give the chance for everybody to participate. I'm thinking, for example, a face-to-face class, right? In my course, I usually have between 40 and 45 students. It would not be possible for me in a class of 1 hour and 30 minutes or even 3 hours to give everyone the opportunity to say something, right? If I do that, maybe I would use up all my class time. And in this sense, in a forum, because people have the time, and they take as much as they wanted to write up, right? And before they post, it gives everybody a chance to participate. And usually what I hear from especially international students, they'll mention to me, usually I cannot participate. I don't feel comfortable participating in discussions in face-to-face classes, right? Because maybe of a language barrier. But then on a discussion topic, maybe those barriers, fall down a bit and people can participate more. My next step in discussion forums, and I've been trying to do this and haven't been successful yet, is to get people to use more of the multimedia options that are available in Brightspace, right? I think the tendency is for people just to use text and to type their answers. And I'd always say, you are welcome to use audio to record an audio response, a video response, or even if you want to do an infographic or other type of representing what you think, you are welcome to. But still, number one choice for people will be using text and just typing.
Yeah, I think because a lot of students also set examples of a few of the students that start the discussions are using text, and I think others follow with text as well. But yeah, I agree with your points about because I know a lot of the courses online now, some of them require, you know, it's graded, discussions are graded, you have to respond. But also for your course, I remember clearly, like, I know we had to respond to a couple of discussions, but I read all of the discussions because I thought it was just interesting, you know, because all the people shared their ideas. And yeah, in this face-to-face classroom, I don't think I'm not as engaged because if I'm not sitting in front of the class, or I'm not confident about my idea, or I'm in a fear of being embarrassed or anything, I wouldn't yell out my idea. So I just that's I think a really good way to keep students engaged online as well, for sure. Yeah, so how about, I was wondering about, you know, students also self-reflecting on their own learning. How does that incorporate into your courses, or what are your thinking, guys?
I think thinking more broadly now because of the pandemic, I think it has really caused many people to reflect about how they learn and how they organize themselves to learning, right? To learn. And I think especially now, if I think of my course, it's an asynchronous course. So although I do have due dates that people have to submit their work, until that due date comes, they can work on their assignment really when they want and when they have time, right? And I think it's a growing opportunity for people in a sense. I think it can be very challenging because when you have a set class time, you know that you have to be there from this time to that time. You can ask questions to your instructor right away, and everything is determined from you when you have to study, right? It's set. But in an asynchronous course, that is not set. Again, you have the due date that you have to meet, but when you work to meet that due date is really up to you. So I think it's an opportunity really for people to learn more about themselves, especially organizational skills, right? And I really wonder, like, I imagine, like, looking back a year ago now when the transition to online happened, that must have been quite the challenge, right? Because one thing is for you to organize yourself for one course, but when you have like 5, 6 courses happening online, oh my, that must have been like quite a challenge. So really kudos for all the students that make it through this year, because there is that thing. It is challenging, but then again, if you go through that, you learn more about yourself. You learn how you learn, and then you become a better learner or a stronger learner.
Yeah, those are some great points there. And also, I want to talk about the tools we were using online, because those are really the main things we were using. And a lot of the tools I never used before, and a lot of students never used the tools before, so it was their first time. So I was wondering about how's it best to prepare students to use those tools, and how do we also minimize distractions? Because I know in face-to-face classrooms, that's maybe a different concept, where someone's pulling their laptop out. They might distract other students, but I know it's kind of hard to control. But in a online classroom, but how do we present the tools in a way where it's effective, and it's it doesn't distract from the actual objective, which is learning there?
Exactly. That is a very good point, and it's actually like a thought that something I've been thinking about in my academic career too, right? So like in the past when I did my master's, I was looking into that too, because my master's was in the area of teacher education and the use of technology, right? And now in my PhD, I continue looking at that, how to employ technology in education. And for me, what I understand as a good approach so far is that the tool or the technology itself should not be the focus. The focus should be the content, what you would like students to learn, but maybe that will happen through the tools, right? So I think in my course, students get to explore many tools. For example, G Suite, which is a service by Google, right? It's basically like a Google Drive, but within like a protected environment. And through that tool, for example, you can create lots of content and you can share that content. You can embed it, right? So I think in my course, students learn how to do that, but that is not the focus, right? They are learning how to use G Suite or like Google Slides to create a mini course and then to share it with other people. So by asking students to develop a mini course that is required to be built by using a specific tool, they kind of learn about the tool as they go. So like my focus is not like, okay, today we have a topic about Google Slides. This is how you build a presentation in Google Slides. That's not it. The final product is a mini course by using Google Slides. So for you to be able to create it, you'll have to learn as you go. And I see this for many other technologies, right? I remember my time as a student, as an undergrad student, I learned how to do PowerPoint presentations because I had to do a presentation for one of the courses I was taking, right? And my teacher, my professor at the time was not teaching us about PowerPoint. It was about something else, but we needed to use for that. So I think that is a good strategy. So like you ask students to use a specific technology and they kind of learn as they go, like they are learning as they do it, learning by doing, right? With a focus on content, but then that is only possible or it can only materialize by means of a tool. So it's almost like an accidental learning, if you can use this expression, right? And what I really like about that is that students are likely to remember the content because they were really involved with the project, but the technological skills they developed will just carry, they'll be able to carry it over in other capacities in their lives, right? So when you learn how to embed the content in Brightspace because you needed to do that for a course, you will know, oh, embedding is something that exists. And, I might want to try to use this in the future if a situation comes that I need to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Because yeah, I think the learning to use the digital tools happens at the same time as creating and maybe analyzing. Because when I was tasked with creating a mini course, I've never used G Suite before, and like it was my first time. But I know the objective was creating a mini course. But so it was a pedagogical and also a technical challenge. So I had the objectives. I wanted to create multimedia content. So I had to learn how to do it. So it wasn't just like, oh, let me try this video thing or let me try this tool. So it meshed together beautifully, where like it wasn't, the focus was actually the mini course there. So yeah, you raised some good points there for sure.
Yes, and we do have this theory called the TPAC, right? Which is the technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. This is usually used in teacher education programs, and it's a theory I really like because it's the question, oh, how we should teach teachers how to use technology, right? And then again, it's a mix of three things. Like teacher needs to master the content of the area, they need to master the pedagogy, and also the technology if they want to use the technology, right? So you shouldn't have to learn these three things separate, right? You shouldn't be able to take a course, oh, teach me how to do a PowerPoint. But for what purpose, right? So if I give you a pedagogical and content purpose, and then you put the technology together, so you just have the three pieces there.
Right. And also, I know we were talking about digital tools, and also another form is social media. I know there's been a lot of talk about why social media is good or bad, and also there's a toxic side and there's a side where people could waste hours on social media. I was wondering, in terms of learning, where does social media play a role in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe social media is like one of the greatest things that has been created recently, right? And I agree with you that it can be used like for bad things too, for bad purposes. And if we don't talk about it, and if we are not critical about it, then we tend to get more bad things out of it. So for me, I believe that social media has to be brought inside education. For example, sometimes we hear today, oh, young kids or teenagers, they don't know how to behave in social media, or they do like dumb things in social media. But then my question is social media present in their school life? Is that present in the assignments they have to do in schools, where they can discuss about it, discuss what went right, what went wrong, the ethics of it? And my answer right away is that I think some projects are doing that, but not so many, right? So I think social media is the tool that really has the potential, very great potential for education, but it needs to be used wisely and critically, right? I confess, when I started using social media, I just bought into the product and started using it a lot without being very critical. But as I started studying more about it and using it more, now I have become, I think, more critical, and I am more, I have a clear objective for what I want to use social media for, right? So for example, if I can give an example of Twitter, for example, I started using it not too long ago, but when I created an account, I had a very specific objective in mind. It was an educational or a professional platform, right? And in my course, we do explore social media by means of exploring them pedagogically, to create specifically, if you want to create a personal learning network, right? There's lots of knowledge out there. Of course, you have to be very critical to filter what is maybe correct and not so correct, right? But just to sum up, I think it has to be in the conversation. It has to be in schools. Teachers should talk to students about that. They should have assignments that use social media, because you have to use it in a way or in an environment that allows you to reflect about it and be critical about it. So yes, a good tool, but it has to be used critically.
Yeah, and also if teenagers do spend hours and hours on social media every day, if they've mastered that tool, then why don't we kind of incorporate education and learning in that? And then they could like develop actually personal learning networks and actually learn from different people. Like I think LinkedIn is a good example. Maybe that's, but also Twitter could be also a good example if it is used correctly. And I know social media has been, used as mostly, reading news or seeing the viral aspect of social media, but there's also definitely learning is very important, especially like developing like networks and for learning as well. Yeah.
So not so much now, but in the past, my trajectory was in teaching English as an additional language, right? So I always try to explore social media with my students, because maybe today, kids, teens, they are writing. Maybe young people have never written so much as they are doing now, right? And reading in the sense that they are typing a lot. So they are producing language, right? And we want kids, we want young adults to be able to write and express themselves through writing. But then maybe some people will criticize me and say, hey, but the language that we use in social media is not like formal language or academic language, right? But still, it is writing, right? And we want people to write. So like agreeing with your point, they're masters in social media today. They are using it a lot. So why not incorporate that into education and use, we were talking about engagement just a bit ago. They are engaged with that. So we should get some pedagogical juice out of it if possible.
Right. And just I was wondering, because EDCI it was a great course, and also I was wondering because you taught the course in about a month, and also I know in the fall and the different terms you also have to teach it in 4 months about. So how does that affect the content? How does it affect your teaching?
Yeah, it's quite intense. I'm teaching EDCI 339 right now. So it started last week on a Thursday, on the 3rd, and it goes until the 30th this month. It's very intense. It's a very intense experience. For me, now it's a bit easier because I have everything built in Brightspace, so I don't have to build the content. I just have to adapt it to a shorter period. But it is very interesting. I think the engagement level is higher because I'm talking to my students basically every day, right? So something now, we are just like about to start topic number 5 already. And that would happen just in 2 months with the course going, right? But now it's just like the first week and we are already there. And there are many components the students have to learn. For example, G Suite can be like a very steep learning curve. And when I teach this course regularly, people have like a month to make sense of it and finally access their accounts. But now, like 5 days in, I already need people to have access to that, right? So there is like a stronger effort on my side to find strategies to communicate the intentions of the course to people and really get people to react and just let them know this is a fast-paced course. You have to check your Brightspace page basically every day, and maybe most importantly, really get organized with the dates and organize a self-schedule or something like that when you have the due dates. So to help students, I try to provide that right away up front so they know all the dates that there will be an assignment that is due, to help them do that. But I think it's nice. I like it. Of course, I have other things going on too. But yeah, I just have to be there and have to be available. Sometimes I start answering emails at 1 a.m., 8 a.m., sorry, and it's midnight. I'm still answering emails, Of course, maybe this is not optimal. I could not do this every month, but just because it's the summer month now, it's okay. And if I think that I will not be teaching July and August, then maybe I can take the break then. So, but yeah, but for engagement, I think this is nice. I just hope people, don't get sick of like watching me like almost every day and getting constant emails from me.
No, that's great. And also, yeah, it does take a lot of effort on your part because it's not only, check-ins with students, it's not only announcements or emails, it's the content, it's grading, it's feedback, and you have a class of maybe 30, 40, 50 students. That's hard work there. So yeah.
And my main objective now, like at the beginning, is not like to leave anybody behind, because it's moving and it's moving fast. And if I kind of lose someone right in the beginning, it's very hard for them to be back on track, because there will be many due assignments already. So really moving forward, but making sure that everybody is coming along.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I know you made a great point about like expectations. You like setting expectations, I think is the most important, is one of the important things. Like if for me to be engaged, I have to know what I'm doing or what I'm learning or what is asked of me to do. So especially in like a 4-week course, how do you like get the message across of the expectations you have because of the shortened period, and also not just the technical aspects, but also like the time aspect, and also the learning objectives as well. How do you do that?
Yeah, so the strategy I tried to employ this year was to contact students before the course actually started. So like I think about a week before the course started, I already had the list of students that were enrolled and even the waitlisted students. So I sent out an email, first of all, with the course outline and really telling students, welcoming them beforehand, so they could have the chance to get acquainted with the course outline. And in the course outline, I have all the expectations, all the assignments, and especially the big 2 assignments in the course. That is like the video lesson that I ask students to record, and also the mini course, which is the final assignment. So really giving the opportunity for people to be acquainted with that before the course started. I opened the course page beforehand too. I didn't expect it for the day of the official day, the start date, to open the course, so that people could already start visiting it. And people really did that. So the first topic in my course is really introductory, making sense. People have an open communication channel with me, checking if the email they have inside Brightspace is the email they actually use to communicate. So I have a checklist for students to do. There is a technology check, just to make sure people had everything they needed. So when the course starts, they don't have to be struggling with that, because they would have all that figured out already.
Right. Yeah. Those are good things to do. Also, I was wondering, because this course is online, the course you're teaching is online. I know UVic's planning a fall return to face-to-face classes. I was wondering, now that we have been through this journey for over a year now in online learning and teaching, what do you see for UVic, or in a broader sense globally, in terms of online learning in classrooms? Do you think will we go back to just regular face-to-face classrooms, or should we start using more hybrid forms of teaching with online and face-to-face?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think before the pandemic, some people were already starting to explore with online possibilities, even for face-to-face courses. And I think the biggest barrier, as I understand it back then, was like the level of comfort with technology, right? Of course, with the pandemic now, you kind of did not have a choice, which is unfortunate and fortunate in a sense, because if you didn't go online, you wouldn't be able to do your job, right? So people were kind of forced into the situation. Of course, this is not optimal. Maybe we really want people to take their time to learn those tools and feel comfortable, but we just could not afford it this year. So it brought lots of people in. And I think people learned so much now. If I'm thinking of instructors, right? People who had never taught online, now being having been teaching online for a year, they learned a lot. So I think what I see for the future, I foresee, I have talked to some people about that because I'm actually very curious about that. My hypothesis would be that some people would tend to incorporate more of the online aspect to their face-to-face classes. So for example, use maybe more bright spaces, at least for like handling assignments. Brightspace does that very well, right? Even if it's a face-to-face class, you can still collect the assignments physically if it's like the way you used to do before, but all the grading can be done online, right? Or even you want to make your lectures now available in Brightspace, because I think that was like a big lesson from the pandemic. People really appreciate being able to revisit lectures, right? Sometimes if you just watch it live, and you want to take notes, you are concentrating into many things at once. And students have told me, I heard this from students, I really appreciate having the chance to revisit lectures. So I think lecture capture, it's something that we are going to see a lot. But some other people told me, maybe I don't want to see Brightspace for a while. So like that shock treatment, that people had to go through, maybe was not as positive as I am seeing, because I've always worked with technology and that is my field. So I just love it and I think it's great. But I understand that that is not the case for everybody. But I think definitely now that people know that those things are available, I think if I can make a guess here, I think people will start incorporating more of those elements in face-to-face courses. And yeah, maybe you're going to see more hybrid or blended ways of learning, especially in the near future now in September, that things are not so certain yet, right? So we plan to go back to face-to-face, but how that is going to materialize, we are still to see.
Right. Yeah. I think giving options is the best way. Having multiple options to learn. I know, especially like with lectures, I think recording video lectures is probably the most helpful things instructors have done, because if a student is not engaged during the lecture, then they can go back and they can actually be more engaged in a way where they can replay parts, they can replay the whole video again, like go maybe stop the video, go to a material, come back. So yeah, it's interesting because face to face, although we don't know what will happen, hopefully everyone will get their vaccinations and we'll be going back safely to the campus. But definitely, I think we've all learned a few lessons from this online experience, which we can use, and especially to engage students, which is interesting. I was wondering, did you want to talk about any other topics that are related to engagement, or have we covered everything?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. It has been a great conversation, Ali,
Yeah.
really. So yes, like from the top of my mind now, I think, maybe I said everything I had in mind and tried to answer all the questions you had.
Yeah, thanks again for giving us the time, because I know it'll be I think this will be a very useful perspective because people are gonna listen to this, they'll hear your perspective, students listen to your perspective, or instructors, anyone. I think it'll be very interesting. And yeah, thanks for giving us the time. And where can people, if you want to share any social media, where can people find you if you want to?
Yes, maybe I think the one that I have that it's open and again for more academic and professional purposes, maybe they can find me on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I am on Twitter under my name, and maybe I have to spell this out. And it's Thiago Hinkel. It's
Yeah.
Thiago Hinkel.
Right.
That would be a way for them to find me on Twitter. And that's also my email. If you go Thiago Hinkel at uvic.ca, you should be able to reach me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk about with you about this, Ali, really.
Yeah. So, okay, this will be the end of episode 1 of the Education Zone podcast. This was a great conversation. Thanks for everyone for listening, and take care. Thank you.